Hello.
Hello. Gina.
Hey,
Ya
it worked.
está, darling. Ya está.
Just getting Anita.
There's Anita.
Anita Myers declined. Oh my God.
She must have hit the wrong button.
Hi, everybody. Getting Anita in.
So let me get started while Anita's coming in. Welcome to everybody who's joined us tonight. We really appreciate seeing you. We meet every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern. There's Anita. And we are the Healing Squad. We are women for women between the ages of 35 and 85. And we always have a little trouble getting Marcia in, but we have David working on getting her connected. And we have a special guest tonight, which is Dr. Gina Ford. You see her there in the blue sweater. Gina is a Oklahoma native, and she was a colleague of mine at the University of Oklahoma, palliative care clinical nurse specialist. And you're in New Mexico, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's living in New Mexico now, working in palliative care. And the Healing Squad, we have Anita with, I guess she's the only one with the glasses, the beautiful woman with the long brown hair. Anita, do you want to introduce yourself? Just a quick little, hey, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing? I'm Anita Myers. The work that I do is really all about emotional wellness, emotional development, emotional intelligence, things like that. So I do that as my job, as my career, working with people, teens, and adults. And I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you. And Gina, I gave you the quickest introduction in the world. Is there anything you want to add there?
Nope, that was perfect. That was good.
And I didn't tell anybody how old you are because I don't know. And
let's just go with 22. I quit aging at 22.
Did you really?
Yes.
I don't know. I think aging is a gift. But anyway, I'm a gerontologist. Don't listen to me. And Claire, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Claire Lucky, and I am also known as the Grieving Bitch on Instagram. This all started because, unfortunately, in 2020, my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer, also concurrently with the COVID-19 pandemic. And I was his primary caregiver throughout that time. And he passed away in June of 2021. And I've been grieving out loud and bitching about it the whole time. So I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm here to provide sarcastic commentary.
And she does it so well. So we got this started because Claire is a ongoing guest on our Everyone Dies podcast. And so if you haven't listened to us, it's a weekly podcast. It drops every Friday on all kinds of different topics to help you learn about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. And we've had Claire is one of our, twice a month, she's on our show talking about millennial grief. And she was talking about how she wanted to do something more and wanted to give people an opportunity, especially millennials who don't really have a peer group, to talk about death. And so we decided to start this, and then decided to make it intergenerational. And we invited Anita because she's really smart and kind, and Claire and I are not. And so
You're nuts. It was really great to be able to, and we had our very first talk last week. And I think even though we all have issues in our lives, things that show up, wrenches that are thrown into the machine of life. And to be able to, I love that when you say I think you said intergenerational, correct? That's the word you use. I love big words. So that's a big word. To be able to, like, I realized, when I talk to you and when I talk to Claire and talk to Marcia, when you do talk to people of different decades that have experienced different things, I think it's really, it's such an advantage, and there are benefits to it, because even though we all like to look at where the differences are, the differences are for us to learn from one another. Whether you're a millennial or you're someone that is, in your upper 80s or 90s or whatever, they come experienced in this world through so many different changes and political this and that, and the fighting and the peaceful times and everything, the commercials, the products, so it's really nice to be able to have such a variety of us. We're all women and we're all sharing our thoughts coming from different age groups. It really, it was impactful for me to think about coming on and being a part of this, and I was really glad that you asked me to come on. And so far, our last one was a lot of fun. Thank you for allowing me to share a little bit. And then the week before, it wasn't last week, it was 2 weeks ago when we started. Isn't that right? Because you went first, Claire. I apologize. So 2 weeks ago, my gosh, it's happening so fast. It's our third show.
That's right. So our topic this week is about the death of a mother. And I spent I'm a palliative care nurse practitioner and done a lot of work in this area. I've worked as a hospice nurse, and also with doing our podcast, there's a lot of issues that come up that I see, especially as I go through Facebook and Instagram, is, daughters without mothers, and people talking about their mother's death and the devastation of that. And frankly, I know that that's true, and I know that people generally usually really like their moms and with their moms and that kind of thing. And but there's other perspectives too. There's, like, Claire and I have different kinds of relationships with our moms. Probably, I don't know, call them troubled, but certainly not the same kind of relationships like Gina and Nita had with their moms. And so it's good to be able to kind of take a look at the death of a mom and say, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Because, we grow in our mother's bodies. We have a link with our mothers before we're even born. And there is something I was reading, I don't even know if it's true, but I was reading about how that DNA from that child stays in the woman's body, that it's there's that connection always. And I'm now, a mother, well, I've been a mother of two daughters for, 26 years. And there have been so many times that I've been in situations with my daughters that I can hear my mom's voice in my head, and I've consciously said, I'm not saying that. And some of us learned how to do that. Others haven't. And they repeat and perpetuate that kind of relationship. But then as that, however long that relationship lasts, somebody's going to die. Either it's the child and that's devastating for the parent, or it's the parent who's going to die. And then it's a question of, how do we reconcile that? How do we get through that? What is the meaning of that? And that grief work is very, very difficult. And part of it has to do with the relationship we've had. It could be extremely difficult if you've had a bad relationship with your mom and you think, God, now they're dead and I'm never going to be able to reconcile this. Or you might say, oh, now they're dead, I can get on with my life. So people have all kinds of different reactions, partly based on the relationship that they've had. And we're actually at Everyone Dies. We're dropping a podcast this Friday about the death of a mother. And featured prominently, that is Dr. Ford, Gina here, because a year ago, Mother's Day, an incredibly traumatic event happened in that her mother was killed in a car accident. And I've known Gina for years, and so on Facebook I would see sort of, Claire, you talk about processing out loud. I think in some ways Gina, you were doing that, do you think?
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. I think so. And then there was times I would post something and then I would freeze and I'd be like, did I go too far? And I was like, oh, fuck it. I don't care if I did. You know, it was like I was just feeling it at that moment. And then there was other times, you know, I felt like I would totally withdraw, which I'm sure all of you have experienced. But yeah, I was definitely going through the roller coaster of emotions. And anybody that was my friend on Facebook, I was, you know, putting them in a headlock and taking them along the ride with me, you know, whether or not they wanted to go.
And I, you know, and I kind of, you know, how you scroll through it. I saw, Gina, that your mom had died, but I really didn't kind of know the circumstances. But then as I was watching your posts over the last year, I thought something bad happened here. It wasn't, you know, like my mom was, what was she, 89 years old when she died. She had a major stroke that the doctor's been telling her for years, get your carotid arteries cleared out. And she was like, no. So she had, you know, the big one. And it's sort of like, well, you know, you had like 10 years, you could have gotten those vacuumed out. You didn't. This is what happened. Of course, I didn't say that. I have a whole lot of inner dialogue that goes on in my head that it doesn't come out my mouth. When I was younger, it did, but I kind of doesn't come out. So I never said that to her. I mean, she wasn't able to talk anymore. It was a very, very bad stroke. But your situation was not bad at all, Gina. I don't know how much of that you want to chat about.
Yeah, no, it was completely unexpected. And, you know, I feel like, you know, I lost my dad when I was, you know, much younger. And so for the longest time, you know, I have a stepdad and, you know, he did really, you know, step in there and, you know, I have uncles, but my mom was, you know, the force to be reckoned with, not only in my life, my sister's life, you know, my children's life. She was, just everything. And, you know, we did have a complicated relationship at times. You know, there was times that she absolutely drove me crazy. And there was times I didn't want to speak to her. You know, we got in arguments. So it wasn't like we always, you know, had a perfect relationship. She wasn't a Pollyanna by any means, but she always took care of me. I wasn't in an abused home or anything like that. And she, you know, I knew I was loved and, you know, so we, you know, and as I got older and I think for the most part, this happens with a lot of us. And as I had my children, as they got older, I began to appreciate, you know, the things that she did for me and sacrificed for me. And so I felt like we were finally, you know, becoming closer again. And that Mother's Day weekend, you know, she was actually making plans to come out to my home in New Mexico. And, you know, as she usually said, she was coming out to visit all of us, but I knew she was coming to see my kids. It really had nothing to do with me or my husband. And, you know, but she ended up, you know, she was in a really unexpected car accident. It was quite tragic. And my oldest son was with her and, you know, it was, you know, my daughter-in-law was, and it was horrific the way the whole thing happened. And, you know, we didn't know, we weren't told anything. We were kind of kept in the dark and it was just, you know, is she's okay? All we were told was, oh, they're working on her. And so we were just kind of in a limbo for several hours. Like, do we go? Do we not go? Where is she? Then they're flying her somewhere. I mean, it was just this whole fiasco. And a lot of it, you know, I shared with Marianne is just because of Oklahoma law, the way that it is, you can't pronounce people in the field, you know, that they have to take them to a hospital. And so she was out in the country. And so, you know, I think she was already gone, but, you know, they worked on her and then they took her into a hospital and, you know, she was pronounced there. And it was just so unexpected for all of us. And, you know, I think my whole family has just been completely ripped apart from that, because she was, you know, she had just turned 70 and, you know, she was a very young 70, not on any medications, totally healthy. And I mean, as my husband used to say, she's going to outlive all of us. I mean, she was very healthy. She exercised every day, you know, and this was just not in anybody's plan whatsoever. And so it was just something that it just took us all completely by surprise. And, you know, our family has just not been the same since then. And, you know, for our culture, women, especially, there were matriarchal societies. So she was the head of our family, and our family's just kind of, our extended family, I feel like, has just kind of dwindled since then. And it's been really tough. And, I've kind of gone through the whole denial, anger, sadness, but really kind of settled into the anger phase, and I really like that. And I think that's why I really like the grieving bitch post, because I feel like, yes, this resonates well with me, because it's just, I'm pissed off, I'm pissed off at the situation. I'm not pissed off at anyone in particular. I'm just infuriated with the situation. I'm infuriated that it happened to her. I'm infuriated for my children. I'm just infuriated at the whole situation. And then I'll wake up and I'll be in total disbelief that she's gone. I'll be, that I'm not going to see her smiling and coming up my sidewalk again, and that we won't go shopping and we won't make plans. And then I just get pissed off all over again. And so I think I do better with that. I feel like I'm stronger with that. When I get sad is when I feel like I don't function as well. So I'm quite comfortable just being pissed off most of the time. And there's times though, I still get, my kids will tell me something and I'll kind of get annoyed with her, or, I still have the motherly daughter things, like our old relationship will kind of come out. I'm like, she said what? And I'm just like, that is just so her. I went and told my husband, I'm like, do you know what my mom said? And I told him, he's like, really? Are you doing this? I'm like, yes, I am so angry with her right now. And he's like, okay, I'm just along with that. But, I just think most of all, I'm just angry that she's not here, that I can't talk to her,
Mm-hmm. Or holler at her, or hang up
yeah.
the phone, or whatever would be the normal reaction.
Exactly.
And the other thing is that sort of traumatic death. There's, when I interviewed you for our show, it was like so clear to me that you've got this post-traumatic stress response. There's this, you've been traumatized by this death and how it occurred. Mm-hmm. And that complicates the grieving, right? Because it's not just about the grieving, it's all the other crap.
Well, I listened to the podcast on, the traumatic grief, and I felt like that helped me so much. And I sent it to everyone, like my husband, my sister, my aunt, I'm like, just listen to this. This explains so much, because, my family, we've had a lot of loss. I've lost, one of my uncles that stepped in, he died of ALS, so, this is not like my first death. I lost my father, I lost my father-in-law, died from cancer several years ago, so I'm familiar with this, but there was something different about this. Not only did I lose my mother, who I was so close to, I talked to, and I felt like, next to us, loved my children, fiercely, and would just do anything for them, and loved us, was our biggest fan, biggest protector. But she was always our advocate on our side. And it was just, there was just something different about this. In a way, I felt like I lost my father all over again. I felt very vulnerable. But I was really, like you said, I felt like I was suffering PTSD. I had terrible nightmares. Even on days that I felt like okay, I would still go to bed and I would have these just wicked, awful nightmares where I was like at the crash scene, and I was trying to do CPR on her, and I was like, trying to bring her back, and I couldn't get her back to life, or I was like looking everywhere for her. I was, chasing her, and I would be yelling for her, and I would wake up and I would be crying, and, wake everybody in the house. And this went on up until like a month ago, and so it just kind of comes and goes. And I think that is something that you deal with whenever you go through traumatic grief. And that's something that I had not experienced, despite the losses in my life. I had not experienced traumatic grief before. And so that was definitely something new for me.
Right. So can I interject real quick? As I'm listening to this, I have questions, because I'm so intrigued with the avenue that this is in when it comes to what you said, traumatic grief. When you say traumatic grief, does that mean the way she had passed, or is it the trauma of just the idea that that someone that you really love is no longer here. You know, is the trauma really based on how she passed away? That's what's constantly going through in a loop in your mind and through your dreams and nightmares and stuff like that. That's what the traumatic grief means.
Are you going to answer
Well,
that, Mary? Yeah.
Well, that's a part of the traumatic grief, you know. So if you see somebody murdered in front of your eyes, or if you have a real bad, you know, not any miscarriage is good, but a really bad miscarriage, or, you know, like for Gina, she was texting her mom and all of a sudden she wasn't answering anymore.
Right. It's a drama. It's so, okay. So, I'm listening to what you're saying, and this is not me giving any kind of solution. This is just me kind of like thinking through this, because I lost my mother. I didn't lose my mother in the same fashion of not even knowing the details, but there was no car accident in this one. But in the way that I lost my mom, it's just making me think about what I was going through as I'm trying to hear what you're going through, because even my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she had it for about 15 years. So she was diagnosed with it at like age 52. And then she passed away I was writing it down to make sure like I knew 67 is when she passed away. But my story, if I just left it there, you might tell the story in your mind that it's like, oh, she went through what everybody else went through who had lost somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's. But I didn't. My father had taken her from me. He made arrangements on my wedding day, after the reception, for her brother to take her back to India, where my family is from India, and my parents have lived here in America all my life. So I got married at 28. So I had no idea. I had planned to be with her. I didn't know she was even going to go to India. I figured if anything, they're going to go back to Atlanta, which is where they were from. So long story short, my father and I have a very bad relationship. He was a very narcissistic person. I'm an only child, and the different stories that took place, the idea of him planning, which unbeknownst to me, her leaving and me never even knowing that she was going to leave. She was going to be taken from me from America. That's the way I looked at it. To go and be in India and to be living there under my father's ruling, if you will. That's the way it looked in my creative thinking, in my mind. You know, he puts her in the tower, and she can't leave it. And I'm here in America, and I'm 28, but you know, I don't have any connections for me to say. My mind's like, I will find a way and I will go and rescue her from the tower that's burning. But all the while it wasn't happening. And so through the years of me wanting to know how she's doing, he wouldn't give me the information. It was a lot of torture, emotional torture, to know how she was. And when it finally got to the point where I heard the news, I think I may have shared it in another talk we had, but I received the news on a work day in the morning, got an email, and the email was very short, quick sentence: your mom died, sorry. And that was it. And so in that time, underneath, like, I'm at my desk, that was the moment I was really put together. If you would have seen me, you know, kicking ass, working, doing my thing, married, blah, whatever. But in this very moment, to see the small sentence, it may have been like the crash in a will. I don't want to overstep that, but it was such a shock to my system. And I think it leaked. It didn't even leak out. It was almost like the levees broke for me in my heart, where I just fell to underneath the desk, and I didn't want to come out, and I just bawled. And like the cry I had was not a cry I knew. So I almost want to say it was like my soul cry, like something that had kept, you know, maybe you have pent up things and you lived your life and you had your way and you hold it together. But I wonder if what I was experiencing, if I could put it into terms, Marianne, maybe, if I did go through some kind of elongated traumatic grief, that I've been trying to, you know, you suppress it as much as you can because you have to survive. You have to move on. You got to do this. You got to do that. And that was one time where I was escorted out of the building. It's so bad. I feel so bad. But I don't know, like the person on the other side of the building was a one-level building, but it was a long building. They all had heard me crying, and people obviously came around, and I didn't even know what was happening. I just felt like I was having an out-of-body experience, and I was brought home. But I think it was through the years of emotional torture and emotional abuse, watching my mom go through emotional abuse, watching her being neglected, watching her being controlled by my father. And then finally, it was almost like in his care, she was gone and I couldn't save her. And it was one of those, sounds kind of a romantic type of thing where I wanted to save my mom. I thought that there was a way. I'm an American. I'm in America. There's got to be someone. I called the Indian consulate. Like I could do all these things. I can't even tell you everything I could do. And like I just never had anyone to step forward to help me get my mom back. I still live with that, that thing. And I've processed through so much. But I'm fascinated when I'm listening to how you're sharing what you're sharing. When you go through your traumatic grief, this is only a year old for you. And it's so new and raw, I'm sure. And the things you have, how have you been processing through it?
Well, real quick, I want to comment on what you said. One thing that stuck out to me from Marianne's podcast on traumatic grief was that part of the traumatic grief can be when you're not able to say what you need to say to them. And so I think that you very well could be experiencing traumatic grief. I mean, to me, I think anytime we go through a death that's unexpected, we weren't there, we didn't get to say what we needed to say, it can be traumatic. So that's just my opinion on that. I didn't, I think that in my mind, I was handling it a lot better than I thought it was last summer. I really was kind of going through the motions and, I really kind of tried to do what I could, and kind of go back to work. And, my youngest son was really struggling because, my mom basically just came and stayed with us during the summers because they were so close. Like we never sent him to summer camps because that was their time together. And so we were like scrambling, trying to find childcare for him, summer camps for him. And so we were kind of focused on him, just kind of going through the motions, just trying to kind of get things done. We took time off, tried to go on vacations. But I remember, at the time I was still working in oncology and I really thought I was like focused, doing a good job. And, I was just trying to pay attention and I would like come to, and the oncologist would just kind of be looking and I'd be like, I didn't even hear anything that anybody just said, and at one point I fell asleep during a meeting and it wasn't like I was staying up all night. I think any of us that have gone through grief know how exhausting it was. And they didn't say anything to me. They were all just absolutely lovely to me. I remember I was sitting there like this and I just ended up dozing off. And I wasn't doing as good as I thought I was. And it kind of became clear to me. And so I ended up, I resigned. And, I was fortunate enough that I was in that position where I was able to take time off of work. I realized that that's not, a reality for a lot of people, but I don't think I was going to be doing a good job. I know I wasn't doing a good job and I was in a position where I was responsible for patients. I was taking care of them and I honestly was afraid I was going to end up hurting somebody. And so I just took a step back, from patient care. I still, was teaching online and doing other things, but I took time off and I stayed home. And that's what I did. And there was times that I felt like I was doing okay. The holidays were just brutal. It was awful and I hated every minute of it. And just, I remember telling my sister, I really just want somebody to come sedate me, wake me up when this is done. I don't want to experience any of this. But you kind of have to go through it when you have kids and do what you got to do. I feel like at times I do okay, but then at other times I get really down and out about things that I wouldn't think that would bother me. So, days that I think I would be really, really sad about, I'm okay. And then other days that, I think, oh, this will be fine. I'm kind of sullen and angry and just don't want to communicate with anyone. I did recently start going back to work, and I was worried a little that might be too soon, but I think it's been pretty good for me. And so, I really just try and kind of give myself some grace, maybe a little bit too much, but I have my little coping mechanisms. My mom's birthday was a couple of weeks ago, and she loved birthdays. That was her thing. She was really big, on Christmases and, Thanksgiving. I want you guys to make your own memories, do things with your children. I'm not going to come and, be the mother that, crashes your house on Christmas. This is your time. But, birthdays were a big thing for her. And so on her birthday, I really kind of hit a wall, and I ordered like 6 churros from the churro place up there and had a bunch of root beer and went to bed, watching The Office. And that was my night, and I didn't really make myself feel bad about it, but that's what I did. So
you just put yourself into a sugar coma, and that was the end.
Kind of curling up with my churro, and I was like, this is my truth. I know my truth. So I probably should be exercising, because I know that's really what I need to do, but I haven't gotten back to that point yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's good that you're finding your ways. Like, you talked about coping mechanisms, and there's some that are good and there's some that aren't so good, but it's okay, because you're in these different moments that you're just trying to address it at the time, and you're conscious about what you're doing. And even when you say I should be exercising, and it's not that I'm saying yay or nay to it, you're doing exactly what you need to be doing, as long as you are allowing it to help you process through. When it was interesting, because I lost both of my parents, and when I lost, this is about moms obviously, but when I lost my mom, the grieving was very, very different. And I'm still, as you hear me talking about it, I'll be grieving for a long time. Even though this happened in 2005, I still grieve when I think about certain things. You talked about anger and all the different phases of what you go through. It's better, much better. But when my father passed, it was a totally different grieving, because of, again, the dynamic of our relationship. But I did mention this sometime, maybe in the last chat. I think it was in the first chat when I was talking with Claire about things. I didn't know which hurt more. I'm still fishing through it. Losing someone that I had a very good relationship with my mother, and I had a very bad relationship with my father. But which hurt me more? Losing someone that I loved so much, like I loved her so much. I loved her so much. Or losing someone I so badly wanted to love me.
Yeah.
That I never saw that. I never felt it. I didn't have that. So, I toss through those moments in my system, but I'm curious, when it comes to your coping mechanism, just out of really just true curiosity, what did you find that was your greatest coping mechanism when you go through some emotions you just are like, whatever. Like, I was in bed and I wasn't getting out of bed until I felt that I was ready to get out of bed. And I think the one thing, this is with my father's passing, and the one thing that got me out of bed was my daughter, who was young, and she said, "Mama, I'm going to climb into bed with you, and I'm not leaving until you're ready to leave. I'll just be with you." And she just said it so easily. And, that never happened to me in my life, and no disrespect to my husband. It was just something that had to come from her. And the way she said it, when you're a mom and you have your little kid and that little voice, and it's just like, it's so deep. It's so deep. And she did exactly that. And that really was something I'll never forget. But when you go through what you went through in the past year, what did you find to be the most helpful coping mechanism through this?
It pretty much the same thing that you said. It was my children, and I could hear my mother's voice, and to her, it was always about the children, whether it's her kids or her grandkids, and I know what she would have wanted. And I mean, there was times that if I could, I would have wanted to stay in bed for days, and just totally focus on my own grief and, you know, kind of shut the world out. But I know that that's not what she would have wanted. I know that's not good for them. I know that they were grieving, and it was really hard to kind of navigate my own grief while parenting. But you know, that's really what got me out of bed was, you know, knowing what they needed and what she would have wanted. You know, there was days that, you know, I was not, it was not easy. And, you know, my husband was wonderful through that too. You know, I was very fortunate, you know, that I had a really understanding, supportive partner. You know, and you know, throughout a lot of the house rules during that time, my son got a lot more screen time than he usually did and things like that. You
All
know,
the
so
house rules are now.
but I didn't stay in bed all day, you know, and so it was, you know, it was things like that. There was times that, you know, when I was really struggling, you know, I journaled a lot, and I have, you know, I call it my ugly journal, and it's just because it has just these horrible, deep, dark, sad thoughts. And I feel like when I go near it, it's very heavy and oppressive, which I know it's just my psyche, but when I go near, because it's just so, it's so sad. And, you know, that's when I journaled right after, you know, almost every day after her death for a couple of months. And I still journal in it from time to time. And, you know, every year on the anniversary of my dad's death, I journal in it. And so that's like my ugly journal that, you know, I write in. And so, you know, I will do that. There's certain songs that I'll listen to that remind me of her sometimes. And I kind of have a quiet place I go and I just think about her. So those are some of the things I do, but, you know, it was hard. And you know, I think about that often. And I think in the work that we do, you know, Marianne, maybe you've reflected on this. I think back on all the lives that families I've touched, you know, and I know how it's not lost on me how fortunate I am and how blessed I am that I have such a supportive family, because I've come in contact with people that don't have that. And I think, I don't know what would have become of me if I didn't have, you know, my children, you know, my older children too, you know, calling on me and checking on me every day. Even, you know, my older sons that I know are out, you know, living their best life, still taking their time to, you know, check on me. And, you know, my husband. And so I think about other people that don't have that and how hard that must be, you know, for them. And so it's just, you know, I've always said that there's no one way to do grief. You know, there's no one way to go through this. It looks different for everyone. And I always hated it when people gave you like a time frame on, well, you know, the first year's the hardest, you get through that and that's it. Or, you know, I just can't even, it's like nails on a chalkboard to me, like my eye will start twitching. But, you know, they always say little things like that, you know, or it's so stupid, but it doesn't look the same. And I really just feel like that you have to kind of give yourself grace, and it looks different for everyone. And what's okay for one person is going to be different for another and different for another. And I just really feel like people need to kind of focus on themselves, you know, and do what they can to get through it. I mean, as long as they're not hurting anyone else, if that makes sense.
Right.
We're all built differently. We all have different environments, and I feel like hearing what you're saying, I mean, I so understand it. You know, there are different cultures out there though that they'll say, you know, they grieve for 40 days and then after that it's over. And it's no disrespect to what they're trying to do. They're just trying to give you kind of like some peace away from everybody so you can cry and grieve. But as someone told me, that grief is like walking through Jell-O. You know, it just, I don't know if that's the best way, but I understood it. It's like, you know, it's a feeling that doesn't, it's not so, the equation isn't so perfect. Right. Because we're talking about emotions, so many different emotions, so many different experiences, upbringing, your relationship, your love for them, and then the triggered moments that are going to come up in your life. You're going to see, you know, flower, and then boom comes the, you know, the tears. So many moments, so many things. Exactly. So the fact that you are aware, you know, you're aware of these things, and sometimes we don't want to be aware of it. Sometimes we don't want to be conscious of it, but where you are is where you are. And, you know that you are so grateful for the people around you to help you through. That's a great thing. That's a wonderful thing. I am so sorry that you had lost your mom, and especially in the way that it happened. and all the symbolic things around it, Mother's Day, all that, you know, but I do hope that you can take the strength that you have, because you're, you know, you're the progeny, like you're the next person that leads the way. And I don't know where you are in the high, if you have brothers or sisters, whatever it is, but you get to now walk this journey to show her what you can do with the life that you have and make it even better for your kids.
Thank you.
So I
That's
wish you all
very
the best.
kind of you. Thank you.
I think that's what's interesting between the two stories, you know, Anita and Gina, is that both, the impression I'm getting is that they're both sort of stories of abandonment, and not that your mother's abandoned you consciously, but that they were taken from you without any opportunity to plan it, to say goodbye, to, you know, say whatever it is that you wanted to say. That was cut off from you. You know, even though, Anita, from the time your mom left to the time she died was like 15 years, it's still that abandonment. And, you know, there's, you know, the conventional wisdom that, you know, moms stay by and do their best for their kids. And for both of your moms, if they could have, they would have. But because of forces outside of them, they couldn't. Now, on the other side of that is, like I said, my mom was 89 when she died. I'm the youngest of four. And so there's a lot of time there. And, you know, a difficult relationship she tended to have with two of her daughters. And when my mom died, my feeling wasn't that I've been abandoned or I've lost my best friend, things that I hear, you know, and, you know, people talk about. My feeling was more of liberation. It was like, I'm not judged anymore. I've always made my own decisions, but those decisions were always in the shadow of what she had to say about them. Not that it changed my decisions, but I still had to listen to it. You know?
You felt the weight lifted from you. Is that what you're saying, sort of?
It was a liberation of, okay, nobody's judging me now, and I made some choices after that I didn't make because I didn't want to hear it from her while she was still alive, and so it was a good. I mean, I'm not saying that her dying was good for me, but that was a release from a very judgmental relationship. And so there's lots of different, you know, these reactions that you know, we as women have, and that, you know, and I know that for men it really is different, but women with their mothers, there's this sort of love-hate relationship all wrapped up in sometimes the same second. And Claire, I know for you, you've talked about, and your mom's still alive, and the conflict of that relationship. What are you hearing from all of this?
I feel as though I'm an outsider looking in, because I have been no contact with my mom for the last 3 years, and it's been a blessing for me to not have that relationship. Prior to my husband getting sick, I was in therapy and working through the issues that I had with my mom, which we can call her, I don't know exactly what she's got as in terms of a mental illness. It could be a mixture of narcissism, sociopath, etc. But the effect was, as a child, I was severely neglected to the point that I didn't have meals in the fridge. My aunt and my grandma would come over and they would see moldy dishes in the sink. My mom was using drugs when I was a kid, and this was all happening in a wonderful suburban town. And it wasn't necessarily hard drugs, but I was completely neglected and parentified and taking care of her my whole life. And it was a real awakening that I had right before Matt was getting sick about all this. And so when he was ill, I really pushed my mom to the side. And then after he passed away, my mom came, rearing, issues with my mother came back and reared their ugly head again. And it really culminated my first birthday without my husband. She called to wish me a happy birthday, and I exploded at her with some of the things I just talked about, like how like once I found maggots in the sink, and like what, how can you explain that, Mom? And she was like, you were on drugs. Like, no, you were, Mom. So there's a lot of conflict with my mother, and I am so worried about her because she is in her mid 60s. She has no plan to take care of herself as she ages. I'm an only child, and as far as I'm concerned, she's made her bed and she's made some really bad choices, and she's taking money from the family for a long time, and I can't support her. So this is I know I've laid out a lot of heavy stuff, but I'm calling it like I see it. And I'm in a really difficult position, and I don't know how to solve it, but I know as I'm grieving the loss of my husband in my 30s, I can't be tasked with it. And my family, I'm close with her sister, and I'm close with other members of our family. They know all this stuff, and we're all just trying to do the best that we can, because the matriarch of our family, my grandmother, she's sick with dementia right now, and she's 97 years old, and she's our priority in the family at this point, but we got to go one problematic person at a time. So she's the top priority, and then we'll get to the other one. So that's
right.
How we're operating.
Yeah, she's got to wait her turn. But you do have the opportunity of listening to Gina's story and listening to Anita's story and listening to a little bit that I've chatted about in terms of looking through those lenses and looking at your mom and saying to yourself, well, if, God forbid, she was in a fatal car accident tomorrow, how would it be for you? How would you view it? My mom, when she had this major stroke, and we really thought that she was going to die, and they resuscitated her even though she was a DNR. And my sister in particular was really pissed that they resuscitated her. And my sister called me and said, guess who's coming home with hospice care? And I said, no. And she said, yeah. So, and my mom lived alone in this house that they bought right after the war. And my kids were young. They were in like sixth and seventh grade or so in there. And I lived 2,000 miles away from them. And I said, well, who's going to take care of them? And she said, oh, well, hospice. I said, no, hospice comes in like a couple times a week. They're not taking care of her. Who's taking care of her? And she said, well, I guess, my brother and her were going to do it. And I said, do you want me to come? And she says, no, you got the kids, you work full time, we're retired. No, we'll take care of it. She says, on that syringe, when there's there's numbers on both sides, which numbers do you use? And I said, you sure you don't want me to come home?
That's funny. Oh,
and she said, well, if you want to. So, it's winter time. I go home. My brother picks me up at the airport. They have mom in her bed. My brother drops me off. He leaves. I go in. She's, can't speak. She can't walk. She can't do anything. And the next morning, I get her up. I bathe her. I look around the house. She has this wheeled kind of desk chair, and transfer onto the wheeled desk chair, roll her into her living room where her favorite chair is, transfer her into there, find a sweatshirt, cut it up the back, put it on her, cover up her lap, put her perfume on, put her rouge on, put her lipstick on. And my brother walks in the door, and the front door is right across from her chair, and he stops, and I thought he was going to have a stroke himself. He said, what's she doing there? I said, sitting. He said, what'd you do to her? I said, cleaned her. And he's like, oh my God, Marianne. And my sister comes, and she said, if I was taking care of her, she'd be in that bed. she said, why did you do all this for her? Because it was my sister and I that she was not nice to. I said, I do this for strangers. Why wouldn't I do it for her? And I spent over 2 weeks taking care of her, the best nursing care she could get. And, but I gave her an earful and she couldn't talk back. It was great. I wasn't mean. I just said, we need to clarify a few things. And I went through it.
I think that's what me and my mom need to reconcile is like I have a lot of anger about my childhood, and nobody's like the perfect parent. Like, we all make mistakes. There's two sides of the story. I'm the grieving bitch now. I was definitely a bitch when I put her through some hell too, but we have to like communicate and say like, you hurt me, I'm angry at you. And like, until we have that, like, I think it's really like no contact, and I don't know where it goes, but I love that, Marian. It's like, yeah.
I think it's actually really great that she had the opportunity. She took the opportunity to share it, because that's very good for her. All this time, she's got all these thoughts and feelings in her system, and when you don't get to say it to someone that this is important to say it to. If somebody hurts you, or like how they talk about they threw the brick and it's in your heart, or they threw the stone and you got stones in your heart, you got to give it back to them. It belongs to them. It doesn't belong to you. And I think about these things when with my mom passing. I didn't have a bad relationship with her, but no matter who you are, no matter what your story is with your mom, if you have a general relationship with your mother, you're going to have high times and low times, and good moments and bad moments. And when you get to the point of your mother is not here anymore, that's why you have all the emotions that you go through in these different odd times. So maybe having a day where you had mentioned, Dr. Ford, you mentioned about how you journaled, and I know right now everyone's like journal. But the thing is, it's really, really good for you to get it out of your brain and onto something, to be able to do that in some way. And so I wrote a letter to my mom. I knew I needed to do it. I wrote this letter that if I could say anything to her, this is what I'd want to say. And I can't even start to talk about it because I know it would get me emotional, but to be able to just say everything you can say that day, everything that you want to say. I'm so sorry that I spilled your whatever, or that I took your earrings and I didn't tell you, and I wore them and then I lost one of the earrings. Like, whatever that is, that seems so juvenile and ridiculous. It's still dangling in your heart like a little stone that doesn't need to be there. So you do it. You have the big stuff, and then you bring it down to all the little things, and then you don't have much more to apologize for because you've apologized for it. Or there's the happy letter. Hey, and I always imagined that there was God's mailbox. I'm a woman of faith, so God's got a mailbox. He knows what's going on with my mom, so I'm just gonna write the letter, and even though I didn't send it through digital, I print it out, and then I just kind of created a little box and considered that the box that if I put it in there in my imagination, she would be able to see it. She probably already knew what I was feeling, but there was something for the human in me to be able to do something. And so you can write negative things that you're going through and just dish it out, and you can do positive things and dish it out. You can create books nowadays where you can have all your pictures and poetry and whatever. I think you talked about certain songs. You can create your own playlist that's about you and your mom. You celebrate your mom and what she thinks is great. You're doing all those wonderful things. But to be able to process through the things that make you want to be the grieving bitch, that make you feel like, I feel good being angry. When you're done feeling good being angry and you want to process through the anger, I hope that, I think you should still, just because physically they're not there, that's me. Like, I like to look at the spiritual side of things. Why not write a letter and see where that goes? See if you can find more grace and peace within the whole experience. So.
Or look at one of her pictures and make yourself a cup of tea and say, Mom, there's things we got to talk about. And here's what I want to say. And it's, probably talking to the picture was not a whole lot different than me talking to my mom after that major stroke. but there was something in my head that says she hears it, she knows it,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, it wasn't mean. It was, here's some facts,
Mm-hmm.
and let's just to clear a few things up. And so, for our listeners, think about that. You know, part of what makes the grieving process difficult is that if you're carrying things with you that you haven't said, makes it a lot tougher. So when you get the opportunity, you know, whenever it is, take the time to say, I'm sorry, to say, I love you, to say, I forgive you, to say, you know, I miss you. And send that out to the universe, say it right to their face, whatever you need to do, so that when the time comes, and it will come, your mom will die, your parents will die, unless you do. And I don't know, it's sort of the life cycle is that they're supposed to die before we do. Take the opportunity to say what you need to say. Don't carry it with you for the rest of your life. It's not healthy. And with that, the Healing Squad, I know Marsha's listening, and doggone it, we're going to get her in here one of these
We're
days.
going to get her. We're not giving her. You know, one more thing to just kind of add to what I love what you said, Marianne. I love how you said what you said. But maybe we can also take these experiences. I know for me, I'm trying to be very, very conscious about my life and the people that are in our lives, so that we don't have to repeat history and the negative things. That maybe we can make the strides to offer love in ways that are wonderful for the family that's around us, for the friends, to be able to kind of lift ourselves a little bit differently. So, you know, when you do lose somebody, you know, me losing my mom was a big deal. It was awful. It feels awful, you know, but now I think about, in her memory, how do I want to be? What do I want to do with the life she gave me, you know? And so now you're putting your love into everything else that you're doing in this world and making your life so worthy. I always try to imagine that my parents are wherever they are and they're watching the show of Anita Myers. Like, what's Anita up to today, you know? And I'm making it where they can laugh, they can hopefully be proud, they can learn a few things in the parenting world. How we can give love to people in such a wonderful, so many ways you can give love to people and have our patience and all. But we can work with who we have around us now and not have to project our anger of losing somebody, but maybe loving more people through the process.
Thank you for that. And Gina, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And
Thank you for having me.
Come
Sure,
back
anytime.
And all of our listeners, feel free to, if you've got something that you want to say, put a little note in the comment, and our healing bitch will let you in. So thank you all. We'll see you next Wednesday. Good night. Thank you.
Night.
Bye, everyone.